Our guest, Nick Kosmider of The Athletic, covers the Denver Broncos, a good friend of the show. I've had him on before, and the Broncos are sitting in an interesting spot where a lot of mocks have them taking a quarterback. Some have Oregon's quarterback, Bo Nix, landing there. Others, including Nick, have this quarterback. And Nick joins us now. Nick, good morning. Thanks for hopping on with us, man. What's the draft coverage been like for you? Are you just at a point where you want the draft to be here already so you can stop doing mocks and stop doing the hypotheticals?
Well, good morning and thanks for having me. Yeah, I think we always all get to that point, seemingly earlier and earlier each year, given just how much we as a kind of a public writ large get inundated with, all kinds of assessments, speculation about this process. But for me, I'm actually sort of enjoying being able to dive into these quarterbacks. The Broncos, of course, haven't had a first round pick at all since 2021 when they had an opportunity to draft perhaps Justin Fields, Mac Jones, but took Pat Surtain instead. And then, the following off season turned around and traded all their picks for the foreseeable future away in order to draft Russell Wilson. Now it seems like the Broncos are going to be moving on from him and are now in a position where they could be drafting quarterback, like you said, at number 12, or perhaps, with a trade that moves them up into the top 10. So, I'm excited actually to get down to Indianapolis next week, get the combine, start to collect some more intel and insight about, how teams are feeling about these quarterbacks. So I'm not quite in the totally over it stage just yet, but check back in with me in about a month.
Give you 2 weeks, and then people start going, "Hey, man, I didn't like your pick here." It's like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just talking to people and trying to gather as much information. I'll get to your mock draft pick. It's really interesting going through. I loved what the Athletic did here with beat writers from different teams. We kind of do a similar thing during the draft, but you mentioned Russell Wilson. That Russell Wilson, Sean Payton, it felt like for many, I think, going into last year, this is the match made in heaven. It feels like he's been flirting with wanting Sean Payton for a couple years. He gets his wish. Season doesn't go right. Even in the midst of people defending Russell Wilson, I felt like I was kind of alone, Nick, in saying, yeah, it's very one-sided. One half they're scoring 6 points, the other half they're scoring 20. The numbers look fine, but it looked clunky to me. Where are they at with Russell Wilson? Is this a done deal that they're going to cut bait and move on? How does all that work financially for them?
Yeah, no, I think your point is well taken. That was my assessment as well of like, some people pointed to the numbers, right? 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, obviously a big increase in his completion percentage over a year ago. But there was no real consistency with that offense. You didn't go into any single game thinking, hey, this offense is going to put it all together and that's why we're going to win. They weren't able to consistently strike any kind of balance on that side of football. And what really rankled Sean Payton is their inability to score in close. They were bad in the red zone. They were particularly bad in goal to go situations, worst in the league for most of the year. And Sean Payton historically has put a lot of that on his quarterback, right? It's not just about what you do statistically. It's how well are you at guiding the offense as a whole. And there was just too many times where the Broncos, if they weren't benefiting from their defense producing a lot of turnovers like they did during that 5-game winning streak Denver had in the middle of the season, then they weren't really able to overcome a lot of their own inefficiencies. And so I think all those things being what they were, the fact that Russell Wilson was benched for the final 2 games of the season, the fact that, he made very public the fact that he had been asked to change his contract in October. And when that didn't happen, he was threatened to be benched. The NFLPA got involved. The league got involved. So it was a situation that turned messy. And while both sides had said, hey, we're open to kind of having this, reunion, we're open to having Russell Wilson here for year 3, I think there's just far too much that would have to be overcome, things that would have to be sort of worked out in order for them to move forward with Russell Wilson as their quarterback. So I think he will be released within the coming days and weeks. Obviously they have to do that before March 17th or his 2025 salary of $37 million becomes guaranteed. They obviously will want to avoid that if they are going to move on. So what you'll have is an $85 million dead money hit for the Broncos. That would be double the previous record that was Matt Ryan when he went to the Colts. So we're talking about a substantial dead money hit. The Broncos, because of the size of that hit, would almost certainly have to post June 1 designate that cut, meaning that they would split that hit over the next 2 seasons, would probably be $35 million this year, $49 million and change in 2025. So, you're looking at 2 years of really significant dead money. And it's why the Broncos are in this mix for a rookie quarterback, right? The best way that you can hopefully um, deal with that situation is to have a quarterback who is very cheap, as drafted quarterbacks are, relatively speaking. So that's again why they're in this mix. They'll also be in the mix for kind of those lower end free agents who would be playing on kind of like a prove it deal, the Sam Darnolds, the Jameis Winstons of the world, and of course they already have Jarrett Stidham, who started those final two games last year. So a lot of different directions this could go, but I do think they'll move on from Russell Wilson.
Nick Kosmider, our guest here, covering the Denver Broncos for The Athletic on Twitter, at Nick Kosmider, 2023 Colorado Sports Writer of the Year. So congratulations on that. I know I'm a little late to it, but congratulations on winning that award. The mock draft is interesting. I'm always fascinated by it. And you participated in this for The Athletic, and in it you have a hypothetical draft. Denver going from 12 to 9. And there's a name that I've seen and heard a lot of the draft pundits bring up, and Nick, I watched a ton of the games, and I'm like, I don't get it. What am I missing here? You have Denver taking J.J. McCarthy, a name that is shooting up a lot of mock drafts, a name catching on with teams. You go through why or what's interesting about it, but I want to ask you, I know the season's busy. Did you get any time to watch J.J. McCarthy in Michigan during the year? What did you think of him when you watched him versus what you've learned or what you've seen about him since the season ended?
Well, as the dad of a toddler, I have to say that my Saturdays, the one day off in the NFL schedule, I typically didn't sit down, quite frankly, and watch all of JJ McCarthy's games. Obviously,
Good for you, by the way. Good for you.
you watch Ohio State, you watch the Alabama game, you watch the Washington game, and I think my takeaway of this is like, listen, he's playing for a 15-0 team, a team that's really good, and they're in situations where the defense is trying to sell out to stop this phenomenal run game, and that gives him a lot of advantages. But I'll tell you what was interesting yesterday. We were on a conference call with Daniel Jeremiah, the great scouting draft analyst for the NFL Network, and he had something really interesting to say because to him, JJ McCarthy, he called him an acquired taste that a lot of people are starting to acquire once they really dig into the film. And by that, he sort of meant, look, we know that he benefited from a lot of things, but there's still situations you start to look at, namely third downs, third and mediums, third and longs, where you go in and you say, okay, in these situations, he's got to be the guy that gets it done, a lot of the red zone stuff. And he came away really impressed as he dug into that stuff with what he was able to do. He has a strong arm, completed a lot of crossers in college that look similar to something that you see in a pro scheme. It's not as if he was just kind of bubble screening you all the time. So the other part of it is, guys, he just turned 21 last month. You look at a guy like Bo Nix, who turns 24 on Sunday. There's a difference there. That kind of means something. JJ McCarthy is still a pretty young guy, and so I think teams are gauging that potential a little bit with him, and that's what's making him a little bit more attractive to scouting eyes.
I know Harbaugh's his guy, but I loved that Harbaugh left, went to the Chargers, and instant was like, he's the best quarterback in the draft. He should be the number one pick. It's like, okay, Jim, he's got to get drafted. He's not going to get drafted number one ahead of Caleb. What is your read on Bo Nix? You have McCarthy today. We're living in a world, too, where Denver taking Bo Nix wouldn't surprise you all that much. What have you heard about Bo Nix as a prospect and potential franchise quarterback?
Yeah, I think that there's, he's in that group of six that I think a lot of scouts you talk to say like could start early in the NFL, right? Like, and it was interesting going back to Daniel Jeremiah yesterday. A lot of people talk about, yeah, you had the time at Auburn, and he's 24 years old, and all those sorts of things. He sees the adversity that he sort of went through in having the Auburn situation and then getting to Oregon. And a lot of people forget his first year at Oregon was good, but the fact that he took such a significant step, it doesn't matter what system you play in or where you are. When you complete 77.5% of your passes and throw 45 touchdowns to 3 picks, like, you can't ignore that. You have to be doing a lot of things right. And so I definitely think that he's a guy that people are definitely high on the floor, right? Like, he's going to come in, he's going to do what you ask him to do. He's going to be solid. And I think that will ultimately give him a really good chance to be a first-round pick. Field Yates, for example, just had his the other day, had him going 20th to the Steelers, a team that's going to be kind of in a similar situation to Denver in terms of looking for a quarterback in a lot of different ways. So Yeah, I think he'll be a first round pick. Right now, as I would gauge it, I would see 12 is a little bit early for him. But one thing that Sean Payton said when he was doing kind of the tour de force at Radio Row at the Super Bowl was, if I love a QB, if we really fall in love with a guy, I don't care where other people think that he should be selected, or the heat that I would potentially get for drafting him at a different spot. So again, if he has those sort of qualities that a team really just attaches to, it wouldn't be a shock to see him get drafted in the top 15 or so.
Nick, I'll get you out of here on this, man, because I do appreciate the time a great deal. I know a lot of our listeners who are following Bo Nix and a lot of the prospects from the Pac-12 love hearing this too. Is Denver in a position, assuming they get out of the rust thing, which you say that they will in the coming days or weeks, is this going to be rookie quarterback steps in week one and they just see what this is with a rookie quarterback? Or is this a sit a rookie quarterback for half a year, maybe a full season, roll with somebody else and let the person learn? What's the approach you think Sean Payton and the Broncos will have, whether that's Nix or McCarthy? Are we expecting day one starter from the rookie quarterback?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think they've left themselves open to a few possibilities. Obviously, with having Stidham, he was a guy that they went out last year in free agency and signed pretty early. Gave him a 2-year deal with a decent amount of guaranteed money, which was a surprise to some for a quarterback who had started 2 games in the NFL after being a 4th-round pick in 2019. Like, really didn't have a lot to go on, and they thought highly enough of him to give him that kind of contract. So he's a guy that's in the building that will have his second year in this offense. There's I think a fair chance that he's your starter regardless of what they do going forward, at least at the beginning of next year. But I also think that they'll explore again like an economical option in free agency, be it a Jameis Winston, obviously who Sean Payton has experience with in New Orleans. And now you're in a situation where you say, okay, we have Jarrett Stidham who's been in this offense. We've got a guy like Jameis Winston or even Sam Darnold who we know can play in this league. Now we leave ourselves really flexible when we get into the draft of like, hey, if we got a chance to get that guy that we want, we can go up, we can get him, we can move on from one of our other veterans, and if he's ready, he can start. I could also very well see them using that scenario and then kind of trading back in the first round, acquiring some draft capital that they've again been just so depleted with because of the trades they made for Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. And so now you're in a situation where you say, hey, maybe we move back. We got Bo Nix. We'll let him kind of develop a little bit to start this season. So again, I see either scenario, not to punt on the question, but they do have, I think, multiple options that they can go, even if like kind of the big splashy one might not be out there.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I love the coverage that you do, man. You do a great job covering the Broncos, and I enjoyed the mock. Thank you for hopping on with us this morning. I really appreciate it. Get back to your toddler, and we'll continue to follow the coverage on The Athletic.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, there we go. Great stuff from Nick Kosmider of The Athletic. He's got J.J. McCarthy, the Broncos trading up to number 9 with the Bears and taking J.J. McCarthy. Let's